From the moment she was born, the little girl betrothed to me as a child called out not for her parents but clung to my hand, calling, "Brother, brother." From then on, I became Emma's little sidekick. At 3, she kicked over my milk bottle. At 6, she made me braid her hair like a maid. She used to say she would bully me for a lifetime. Just like that, we grew up quarreling and playing together, eventually getting married. I thought that would be my life. But 3 years into our marriage, she pushed me off a high-rise building with her own hands. She roared, "This is what you owe me. If it weren't for you breaking up me and Sincere, we wouldn't have lost 3 years. It turned out that Victoria's love for me was all an act. On our wedding anniversary, Victoria threw a stack of documents in my face. "Zachary, you're bankrupt. You have nothing left to threaten me with." "Was I not good to you?" I asked. She looked at me coldly. "If not for you, I wouldn't have been separated from Sincere. This is what you owe me." Victoria intertwined her fingers with the man standing behind her. "It's over," she declared as a group of creditors marched in, taking everything of value from the house. The stack of documents she hurled at me contained stock transfer agreements, dismissal notices, and proof of my bankruptcy. Victoria had not only swallowed my company but also borrowed $5 billion in my name. "Why?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Because only when you're utterly ruined can I pursue my happiness." The 3 years of marriage had been a charade, a calculated sacrifice for today's revenge. She wanted to see me lose everything, left in ruins. "This is my mistake alone," I pleaded. "Spare my family." Victoria's face was lit with a smile, but her eyes were icy. "Kneel and beg me." I dropped to my knees, begging her to spare my parents. She leaned close to my ear and whispered, "Fine, as long as you die." I looked up into her eyes, seeing nothing but resolve and coldness. I climbed to the rooftop, standing at the edge looking down. Victoria stood in the shadow of the wall, watching it all unfold. She genuinely wanted me dead. As I leaped, I heard my parents' anguished cries from behind. My last conscious thoughts were their sobs and her whisper in my ear, "Now it's your parents' turn." She never intended to spare them. When I woke up again, I found myself surrounded by guests in a banquet hall. The past life now seemed like a dream. I stood at the entrance of the hotel, wanting to cancel this ridiculous welcome party, one meant to celebrate Victoria's return after completing her studies. My mother stood beside me, worried. "What's wrong?" "Mom, I want to cancel today's welcome party. I want to protect the family's dignity." "Nonsense," she scolded. Victoria finally came back. How could we not show any gesture of welcome? I sighed inwardly. My mother was right. "I was just joking," I said. She rolled her eyes at me. Still so immature. At that moment, Victoria's parents arrived, but Victoria was nowhere to be seen. Mrs. Liu smiled and asked with concern, "Zachary, why do you look so pale?" Before I could speak, my mother replied for me, "He's just nervous." Mrs. Liu chuckled, and both sets of parents teased me, thinking I was still the lovesick fool nervous to meet my long-absent fiancé. But I was only thinking of how to withdraw and let her reunite with her true love. As all the guests took their seats, Victoria still hadn't arrived. The absence of the main guest stirred whispers among the crowd. Both sets of parents grew visibly uncomfortable. I gently placed my hand on my mother's. In this life, I vowed not to let her or my father suffer because of me. Another half an hour passed before the hotel doors finally opened. Everyone turned to look. My parents stood up, eager to welcome their long-awaited daughter-in-law. My mother even picked up the gift she had prepared, ready to meet her at the door, but she froze mid-step. It was Victoria, no doubt, but her fingers were tightly interlocked with those of a foreign man. She leaned against him, and there was no need for words. Everyone present could see their relationship. The man was tall, with golden hair and blue eyes. Despite the difference in ethnicity, his striking good looks were undeniable. Some guests sneaked glances at me, their eyes filled with pity. Everyone knew about our childhood engagement. I had waited for her for years, rejecting countless eligible women, all for the day she would return and we could marry. But who could have predicted this? She had come back, only to have given her heart to someone else. Victoria's parents looked livid, while mine appeared deeply embarrassed. Mr. Liu pointed angrily at the door. Either he leaves or the two of you leave together. Victoria held on tightly to the man's hand, refusing to let go. Mr. Liu, now furious, raised a wine glass, ready to smash it to the ground. I stopped him, leaning in to whisper, "Sir, don't make this any more humiliating." But Victoria was unbothered. She walked in boldly, standing before her parents with the man beside her. "This is my boyfriend, Sincere," she announced loudly, "and he is the man I want to marry for the rest of my life." The guests erupted in murmurs. Mr. Liu couldn't hold back any longer, smashing the wine glass onto the floor. "I don't agree," he shouted. "How could you do this to Zachary?" I knew he was only using me as an excuse. He didn't want his daughter marrying a foreigner and needed our family's support. In my past life, I didn't understand this. It was because I had long since. I had made up my mind she was my wife, and I would fight for her no matter what. But I had long forgotten that what could be salvaged was either indifference or resentment. She only married me out of pressure, carrying with her a heart full of unwillingness. She played the role for 3 years, deceived everyone, making them believe she was happily married to me. But behind the scenes, she was systematically dismantling the Zachary family. She was the perfect predator, and we were merely her prey. At that moment, the man beside her asked in broken English, "Victoria, do you already have a fiancé?" "My dear, that was arranged by my family." "I don't love him. The one I love is you, and you're the only one I want to marry." "I love you too," he replied. The two flaunted their affection openly, completely ignoring everyone else. Victoria's father's face turned red with rage, and just as he was about to flip the table, I stopped him. "Sir, let's end the engagement. Victoria has already found someone she loves, and I'm willing to let her go. From today on, we'll go our separate ways, and there will be no more ties between the Zachary and Victoria families." Before I could finish, her father interrupted, "Absolutely not." "Then what would you have me do, sir?" "Don't forget, the dignity of your family matters, but so does the dignity of mine." With that, I took my parents and walked away. Behind us, I heard the sharp sound of a slap and an angry shout, "You ungrateful child!" It seemed like the matter had concluded with my withdrawal from the engagement, but I knew it was far from over. As long as the Victoria family needed the Zachary family's support, her parents would never agree to the annulment, let alone her marrying a foreigner. In my previous life, this was the reason why Victoria ultimately gave in. Her mother, knowing how deeply I cared for Victoria, fanned the flames and manipulated me. I had personally witnessed her breaking up with Sincere. That man never understood why love couldn't conquer all. He had fought fiercely to keep her, only to be beaten up by a group of men. Victoria thought I was behind it all and blamed everything on me, but I had no idea. It was her father's doing, a threat to make Sincere leave the country. The day Sincere left, I remember the way Victoria looked at me, with hatred and unwillingness. I had always thought it was just my imagination, but it turned out to be her genuine feelings. After that, she became calm, as if all her previous resistance had been an act. She transformed into the perfect wife. I had been deceived once, so this time when her mother approached me again, I refused. I knew that the Victoria family needed the Zachary family's help and wouldn't give up so easily. I consoled her mother, saying, "Marriage and dating are different, let them be together. Over time, their feelings will fade and they'll naturally separate." "You're right, I hadn't thought of it that way," she responded, unwilling to strain her relationship with her daughter. She assumed I would still wait for Victoria and Sincere to part ways. In my previous life, I had indeed done just that. But why should I? Why should I, the heir to the Zachary family, settle for a woman who didn't love me? The Victoria family's arrogance knew no bounds. She patted my shoulder and said, "You're so understanding. I've always thought of you as my own son." "Ha, own son. If I weren't the Zachary heir, would she still say that? In my previous life, when Victoria did all those things, she never once mentioned being like a mother to me, not even when our family had helped theirs in the past. Victoria always believed that it was our family clinging to hers, desperate to marry her. In my past life, I made mistakes, but not this time. Over the years, many suitable women had shown interest in me. Queenie, for example, was my junior in college and the daughter of Mrs. Smith. She had even confessed her feelings to me. I had always turned her down because of my engagement, but deep down, I admired her cheerful and straightforward personality. When news of my broken engagement spread, she was the first to come to my house. She must have rushed over because she was out of breath when she arrived. The moment she saw me, she ran up and hugged me tightly. "Is it finally my turn now, Zach?" The last time she confessed to me, she had said she'd wait her turn and asked that if I ever ended things with Victoria, I would consider her first. "Yes, it's your turn now, Quinn. Will you marry me?" She lowered her head and didn't say anything. I thought she was going to refuse. "If you think it's too sudden, we can wait." Before I could finish, she stood on her tiptoes and kissed me. When she pulled away, her eyes were red. "I will." A pang of guilt rose in my chest. I had made her wait far too long. At that moment, I realized I no longer loved Victoria. Waiting for her had been nothing more than a habit, an obsession. After everything I had been through, I finally understood I had moved on long ago. My mother was overjoyed about Quinn and me. Soon our families were discussing wedding plans. One afternoon, while I was reviewing documents on the couch, Quinn lay across my lap, flipping through a catalog of wedding dresses. Although both families had agreed to hold the wedding after Quinn graduated, she was adamantly against waiting. "I don't want to wait," she said, "and getting married won't stop me from finishing school." Faced with her determination, our parents could only agree. The wedding was grand, attended by many guests, but not the Victoria family. Yet, just as we were about to exchange vows, the doors to the banquet hall were flung open. Standing there, dressed in a wedding gown, was none other than Victoria. "Zachary, if I told you I wanted to marry you right now, would you say yes?" She grabbed my wrist as she spoke, attempting to drag me away. Guests in the audience began standing up, some already recording the scene on their phones. I yanked my hand free, glaring at her. This woman had never cared about anyone else's feelings. When she didn't want something, she tossed it aside like garbage. But when she did, she expected it to be hers for the taking. Life doesn't work that way. "Victoria, I don't love you anymore. Leave." "You're lying. You waited for me for 20 years. How can you suddenly say you don't love me anymore?" The woman in front of me was nothing short of absurd. "Victoria, who do you think you are? Is it because of her? Is it because of her that you gave up on me in the family business?" So it was still about the company. I lowered my head, gently kissing Quinn's lips. "Do you see clearly now? This is my wife. What right do you have to question me? Are you the ex-girlfriend who cheated on me?" Slap. A sharp slap landed on my face. "You liar." Her blow made me turn my head slightly, but before I could react, Quinn stepped forward and slapped Victoria squarely on the face. "Vicky, you caused a scene at my wedding. Did you really think the Queen family wouldn't respond?" "Ha! The Queen family? If it weren't for your connections to the Crawford family, the Queens wouldn't even matter. Don't act like you're above it all. If the Crawfords weren't useful to you, would you have been so eager to marry him? Just because your heart is filthy doesn't mean everyone else's is too. Victoria, thank you for giving up on Zachary. Now he's finally mine." I looked deeply at the woman beside me, pulling out the wedding ring I had prepared long ago. Just as I was about to place it on her finger, Victoria snatched it from me. She opened the box to reveal a diamond ring with a stunning blue gem, a ring I had prepared for my future wife. One Victoria had always coveted. "You're giving this to her? This is the ring you promised me." Her voice was shrill, her eyes burning with rage as she stared at me. "This is a promise I made to my wife, but you are not her." I reclaimed the ring from her and carefully slid it onto Quinn's ring finger before pulling her into a kiss. In her eyes, I saw a spark of starlight, as if the entire world had condensed into this single moment. Fine. So you've decided to choose her over me. Just wait and see, Victoria spat before storming off. Quinn gently tugged on my fingers, her voice laced with concern. She won't do anything crazy, will she? I've done nothing wrong to her, I replied calmly. That very night, a scandal about Quinn being a mistress shot to the top of the trending topics online. The source of the smear campaign was obvious. When I called, her smug voice came through the phone. Regretting your decision already? I could practically hear the glee in her tone. What do you want? Help the family business and I'll hold a press conference to clear Quinn's name. Otherwise, she'll carry the label of mistress for the rest of her life. Before I could respond, she hung up. Victoria had always been ruthless, cruel to others, and even crueler to herself. Only someone like her would use a strategy that harmed others at the cost of self-destruction. Quinn's eyes were red, but she still managed a brave smile. It's fine. The truth will come out eventually. As long as you know I'm innocent, that's enough. I pulled her into my arms. I won't let her tarnish your name. Don't worry, I'll handle this. Rumors don't need evidence to spread, and even if the matter was investigated, it would never trace back to Victoria. The solution in this lifetime could only be to go along with her demands, helping the family business so she would clear Quinn's name. For the Crawfords, aiding her company wasn't a big deal. However, after breaking off the engagement with Victoria, I had severed all ties with her family. Even any business dealings had been cleanly cut. All Victoria wanted now was to restore those connections. After ironing out the details of the contract with my legal team, I informed her company. But to my surprise, the person who showed up for the signing was Victoria herself. The moment she walked into the conference room, she tossed the contract onto the table. This won't do. Why not? Mr. Z, you're the one asking for my help now. How can you expect the old terms to apply? Naturally, we need to revise the profit margin in my favor by 10%. Victoria, don't push your luck. 15. I almost laughed at her audacity. How had I never noticed her shamelessness before? Fine, 15 it is. Just don't choke on it. Once the contract was reprinted, I signed it without hesitation. This amount of money was nothing compared to Quinn's reputation. After signing, Victoria came over to shake my hand, leaning in to whisper in my ear. Mr. Z, are you sure you don't want to get back together with me? I sneered. I'm already married. Are you saying you'd like to be a mistress? I thought you prided yourself on being above that. And what about Sincere? What happened to him? Victoria's face turned cold as she left. I knew she hadn't moved on from Sincere. Everything she did to me was simply for the sake of her family's business. But the scandal didn't die down. On the contrary, more and more accusations surfaced, painting Quinn as a manipulative gold digger. When I called Victoria again, her response was dismissive. I'm abroad right now. There's an emergency with the company's international business. I can send out a message to clarify things, but a press conference will have to wait. It's not that I don't want to help, but I have priorities. Besides, I wouldn't want to be tied to you anymore. I have a boyfriend, after all. After that, she stopped answering my calls or replying to my messages. Even her parents became impossible to reach. It was clear that she was trying to cling to Zachary's company like a parasite. Meanwhile, information about Quinn's school, major, and even her class and student ID had been dug up. Every time she showed up at school, people would point fingers at her. Some even barged into her classroom to hurl insults, calling her manipulative and a homewrecker. Even her teachers had private talks with her, advising her to take a leave of absence to avoid the spotlight. Recently, strangers had started showing up near her family home. Quinn hadn't told me about any of this. It wasn't until yesterday, when I left work early to pick her up from school, that I noticed the stares and whispers directed at us. When I questioned her, she finally admitted everything. On our way home, she mentioned the suspicious people lingering around her neighborhood. The security guard said that many unfamiliar faces had been loitering in the area recently, though their intentions were unclear. "Brother, maybe I should take a break from school for a while," she suggested hesitantly. "We just got married, so we could use this time to go on a honeymoon. By the time we return, this whole thing might have blown over. I'm sorry, it's all because of me." I gently ran my fingers through her hair. "A honeymoon does sound like a good idea, but we can't just let this go unchecked. Don't worry, I'll handle it." "All right, I understand. I just didn't want to worry you because you're so busy," she replied, burying her face in my chest. When we got home, I stepped onto the balcony and dialed Victoria's number. It rang but went unanswered. I then called her father instead, and this time, the call connected. "Mr. Liu," I began. "The additional terms of the contract we signed stipulated that Victoria would publicly clarify the nature of her relationship with me. But so far she hasn't fulfilled this obligation, and it's caused significant harm to my family. If she doesn't hold a press conference and clear the air within 3 days, our cooperation ends. Furthermore, Liu Corporation will owe us $30 million in breach of contract penalties." I didn't wait for his response before hanging up. Not long after, Victoria called me back, her tone accusatory. "What's the meaning of this?" she demanded. "I'm simply acting in accordance with the contract, Miss Liu. If you have any objections, feel free to consult your lawyer," I replied curtly, preparing to hang up. "Wait, I really can't return right now. Please give me a few more days, a week." "I'll definitely resolve this within a week," she pleaded. "Sorry, Ms. Liu, but I can't trust your promises anymore," I said before ending the call. When she kept calling back, I simply blocked her number. I then contacted the company's legal team, instructing them to initiate proceedings against Liu Corporation for breach of contract if Victoria didn't address the online rumors within 3 days. Quinn's mood improved slightly after this, though I could tell she was still putting on a brave face. Even my mom called to ask about the situation, concerned about the rumors circulating online. "Although Quinn's family hasn't said much about it, you need to resolve this quickly before people start questioning you," she advised. "Don't worry, Mom. I'm planning to take Quinn on a trip to unwind. We'll treat it as a honeymoon. I'll leave the company in Dad's hands for a while." "All right, you two go and relax, but make sure this matter gets sorted out soon," she replied. After reassuring her, I told Quinn, "I've spoken to my parents. We can go on our honeymoon now. Where would you like to go?" The idea of a trip instantly lifted her spirits. She jumped up excitedly and began planning our destination. Watching her dart around the room, her enthusiasm bubbling over, I finally felt a sense of relief. Just then, an unknown number called my private line. I never answered calls from unfamiliar numbers, so I ignored it. Moments later, a text message arrived. "Zachary, you really dared to go through with it? Aren't you afraid of Queenie's reputation being completely destroyed?" Of course I was afraid. I had been investigating the source of the recent negative rumors, but so far, I'd found nothing. Still, I knew Victoria had no intention of clearing things up. If I continued to compromise, her demands would only grow. If necessary, I'd adopt a wait-and-see approach. The internet had a short memory. Over time, the scandal would naturally fade, and people would move on. By the time we returned from our honeymoon, Victoria still hadn't addressed the rumors. As a result, Zachary Enterprises formally terminated its partnership with Liu Corporation and sought damages. My mother mentioned that Victoria's parents had come to our house, begging to see me and even complaining to my parents about me, but my parents had turned them away. Ever since I called off my engagement with Victoria, her family had only reached out to us when they needed something. This time was no different. Yet through it all, Victoria herself never made an appearance. The rumors gradually died down. I personally accompanied Quinn back to school, and people there began to question the validity of the gossip. Just when I thought the matter was finally behind us, an old photo surfaced online. It was a picture of me and Quinn from my university days, with a caption that read, "Still don't believe she's a homewrecker? Because I sure don't." The photo had been taken during a college sports event, At the time, I was oblivious to Quinn's feelings for me. Our families had been close since childhood, and I'd always seen her as a little sister. When we posed for the photo, she had leaned against me, but I hadn't thought much of it. Back then, she was just a freshman, and it wasn't until her junior year, when I was in my second year of graduate school, that she confessed her feelings for the first time. When I told her I had a girlfriend, she didn't pursue the matter further. She wasn't a homewrecker, and many people knew that. Soon, several former classmates came forward to debunk the rumors, pointing out that the photo was just a memento from a sports event years ago. What does this prove? Someone scoffed online. From what I recall, Zachary was always open about having a girlfriend back then. It's laughable how people can twist a random photo into a scandal. If that's the case, should we all be worried about photos of us being turned into baseless gossip? Does spreading rumors cost nothing these days? That photo was taken by me, yet some people only believe what they want to believe. Even if you put the evidence right in front of them, it's useless. Is this an attempt to clean up their image? Money really does make anything possible. Would ordinary classmates get so close for a photo? Come on, I'm not that gullible. The photo reignited something that had already lost its heat, causing a frenzy online. My phone screen lit up. It was a call from Queenie's mother. "Zach, what's going on with all this news online recently?" "I'm sorry, ma'am. This was my oversight. I've been investigating the matter and will resolve it as soon as possible. I believe you, but I'm worried about the pressure on Quinn." "I understand. I'll be there for her. Please trust me. This will all blow over soon." The situation escalated online to the point where no amount of money could suppress it. But then, suddenly, another major scandal surfaced, wiping Queenie's story off the map entirely. Victoria Corporation's overseas branch had gone bankrupt. Their imported and exported goods were suspected of violating customs regulations, with some even found to be contraband. Victoria's family business was done for. Amidst all this, Victoria was frantically messaging me. "Zachary, please save me. I swear I'll clear Queenie's name as long as you can save my family. I'm begging you. I'm right outside your house. Please come out." The doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there she was, her hair disheveled and makeup incapable of masking her exhaustion. "Zachary, please. For the sake of the friendship between our families, help us. I'll do anything you ask. I swear, I'm not lying this time. I admit I was the one behind the rumors about Queenie, but if you're willing to save Victoria Corporation, I'll hand over all the evidence. I'll publicly apologize and clear her name." Tears streamed down her face as she spoke. Just then, my mother called. "Zach, see if you can help the Victoria family. They've even come to our door. It's really pitiful. I don't think you can turn them away." Victoria stood at the door, her eyes filled with tears. "Please, I'm begging you." "All right," I said, closing the door behind me. The long-delayed press conference was finally held. The media buzzed with speculation about the scandals involving Victoria Corporation and my own company. Reporters swarmed the venue. As soon as the conference began, a journalist asked, "Ms. Victoria, is it true that you're being coerced into holding this press conference?" Her expression was blank as she replied, "No, I'm here to tell the truth. I ended my engagement with Mr. Zachary a long time ago, and I'm now in a relationship with someone else. Please stop spreading baseless rumors. Mr. Zachary and Ms. Queenie are already married. These false claims have caused great harm to all of us. If anyone continues to spread such lies, we'll take legal action." At the right moment, my company's legal team presented the evidence we had gathered, along with the evidence Victoria had handed over. The room erupted in shock. "Ms. Victoria, were you involved in spreading these rumors?" one reporter asked. Victoria was silent for a moment before saying in a low voice, "Yes. Out of jealousy, I spread false information about Ms. Queenie and Mr. Zachary. I apologize." She then bowed deeply. From the back of the room, Queenie and I watched hand in hand before quietly leaving. The rumors targeting us had finally come to an end. but the issues between Victoria Corporation and my company were far from resolved. After the press conference, Victoria called me immediately. "Zachary, I've done everything you asked. Now will you help Victoria Corporation?" "Don't worry, I'll keep my promise." Victoria Corporation had already been sued for breach of contract, but as I left the press conference, I instructed my legal team to drop the case. This was never about the money, it was about clearing Queenie's name. Now that we had achieved that, I didn't want any further entanglements with Victoria Corporation, but they wanted more. Soon enough I heard Victoria's voice screaming outside my door. "Zachary, open the door. I know you're in there. You can't go back on your word." When I opened the door, she swung her hand to slap me, but I caught her wrist before it landed. I wasn't going to let this woman strike me. "Zachary, you liar." I let out a small laugh and shrugged off her hand. "What exactly have I lied about? What does your family even have that's worth deceiving you for? I've already spared you the breach of contract penalties. Isn't that enough? Do you expect me to clean up all your illegal activities too? Who do you think you are? And who do you think I am? Actions have consequences. Even I, let alone my company, can't help you evade the law." She clutched at my shirt. "You promised to help Victoria Corporation." I pried her fingers loose. "Yes, I helped with everything that didn't involve illegal actions. But for the rest, I'm sorry, I can't do anything." With that, I closed the door. She continued crying and shouting outside until I had security escort her away. Investigations into Victoria Corporation's wrongdoings progressed quickly, but neither Queenie nor I paid them any attention. After the press conference, apologies flooded the internet. Even the photos of me dropping Queenie off at college somehow resurfaced, now accompanied by a wave of adoration in the comments. But none of it affected us anymore. Life gradually returned to normal. Before long, Quinn had also graduated. She had a younger brother at home and didn't need to worry about managing the family business. She found a job she loved, which required her to travel all over the country. Our only frustration was the relentless pressure from both sets of parents, nagging us about having a baby every other week. As I glanced at my phone, it lit up with a call from my mom. "Mom, Quinn is coming home today. I need to go pick her up. Whatever it is, can we talk later? I just wanted to let you know, the Victoria family case has been ruled on." The Victoria family. After all these months, their matter had finally come to a close. Back before Victoria returned to the country, her family had already been struggling due to mismanagement and financial difficulties. That was why they were so eager for me and Victoria to get married. However, after the engagement was called off, they lost the support of Mr. Z's company, which only made their decline more precipitous. It was during this time that Sincere stepped in with a proposition. He claimed to have a company abroad that could help the Victoria family expand into international markets. Desperate for a lifeline, they clung to his suggestion without a second thought. Meanwhile, Victoria kept delaying her return and refused to hold a press conference. Unbeknownst to her family, she was busy setting up a branch office overseas. She probably thought that once the branch was established, the Victoria family would no longer need Mr. Z's support, and the press conference would become unnecessary. But she overlooked the contract. That particular agreement, though seemingly minor in its revisions, detailed strict requirements and penalties for the Victoria family. In the past, due to our relationship, Mr. Z's company had always gone out of its way to accommodate them. They had grown so accustomed to this that they didn't bother scrutinizing the new contract. Even when Mr. Z demanded compensation from them, Victoria still wasn't alarmed. Sincere must have painted her a rosy picture, convincing her to keep stalling. In the end, though, the final blow didn't come from me. It came from Sincere himself, the man she loved the most. Sincere did have a company, but it wasn't running any legitimate business. It specialized in distributing prohibited goods smuggled from various countries. When he accompanied Victoria on her trip back home, he had already set his sights on the Victoria family. While their fortune couldn't compare to the wealth of the Yan family, it was a giant compared to his small operation. He had been plotting to drag the Victoria family into his schemes ever since. When he learned about their financial troubles, he saw it as a golden opportunity. Sure enough, with a bit of coaxing, the Victoria family fell for it. What Sincere didn't know was that the authorities had been monitoring his company for some time. Right after Victoria's overseas branch was set up and even before the first shipment arrived, the police intervened. The Victoria family's shipment, which had been organized in collaboration with Sincere's company, was seized by customs. Soon, news from abroad reached home, and it was only then that the Victoria family realized they had been duped. But by then, it was too late. The goods had already been confiscated, and worse yet, Sincere had hidden certain items in the shipment that the Victoria family knew nothing about. Fortunately for them, they weren't aware of the full extent of his deception. In the end, Victoria was sentenced to a year in prison and fined $3 million. The Victoria Corporation declared bankruptcy. I didn't tell my parents about what had happened in the past life. I didn't want them to spend their remaining years harboring resentment. But I also couldn't bring myself to forgive. This outcome was enough. Quinn had been away for almost 2 months this time. The moment she saw me, she ran straight into my arms. She'd gotten a bit tanned, and when she looked up at me, her eyes sparkled. She leaned in to kiss me and said, "I've got some great news to share with you." "What is it?" I asked. "Or take a guess. Your photo exhibition got published?" "Nope." "You gained weight?" This time she didn't pretend to be annoyed like she usually did when I teased her about her weight. Instead, she lowered her head, looking a little shy. "I did gain weight," she said softly, "because I've got a baby. Zach, you're going to be a dad."